Welcome to Tech Pression Special on our very own Tech Pression TV. My name is Ibuko Bankole, and on Tech Pression Special, we analyze technology issues as it relates to the African tech ecosystem. Today, we're looking at why Africa's power and internet blackouts limit technology growth. Of course, I'm not going to be on this alone. I have with me Mr. David Utibe Abasi. He's a data analyst and business analyst who is focused on digital transformation. Thank you for joining us, Mr. David Utibe. Okay, so the African tech ecosystem has been going through a whole lot of issues over the years. As much as they say that digital transformation keeps increasing and keeps improving. But there are several issues. And for example, when we see people complain that internet connectivity is low, that their data is not going on well, or that they're having issues connecting to the internet, people think that it's just the telecom company's fault. But there are several reasons to this. So, can you tell us how power, broadband, and logistics keep ordinary Africans in a half digital life or in poor digital connectivity, while advanced economies already treat, fast internet speed as of now?
Thank you so much for having me today. And to answer your question, the half digital life you're describing is a perfect term for a frustrating paradox. Now, having a device and the desire to participate in a digital economy and not having power, broadband, and logistics in order to achieve your presence in the digital economy can be frustrating. Now, in the African market, many African countries spend 40% of their operational costs on diesel for their generators. Now, these are money or funds that are supposed to be channeled to hiring or innovations, creating innovations, creating new ideas for their digital market, for the digital economy. But it's being channeled for what? Getting fuels, diesels for generators. Now, this doesn't happen in the Western world, in Europe, in Asia, in America. Now, to be honest with you, I've been in the UK for 3 years now, and I have never set my eyes on a generator. That is to tell you how trustworthy the government or the economy here, the government here have been able to set up their power sector to stand that they don't need a generator as a standby or as a backup plan. Don't get me wrong, they have standby generators in case of an unforeseen power outage. But what I'm trying to say is you don't just see generators everywhere. You don't just see businesses getting generators to power their business because there's constant power supply. That being said, power there's a major gap in power from the Western world and in Africa. There's secondly the broadband. Now, while someone in China or someone in Europe, let's say United Kingdom, England, or Netherlands, thereabout, are accessing the internet with a 1 gigabyte per second. Someone in Africa is accessing the internet with 10 megabyte per second or even lesser than that. Now, such persons or such people who access the internet with 10 megabyte per second have limited access to the internet. They cannot create good innovations with such access. Now, why someone using 1 gigabyte per second in the Western world, talking about Europe, Asia, America, is doing online trainings, talking about AI creations, AI participations, or even create a cloud-based computing and stuff like that. Someone in Africa, someone in Lagos or Addis Ababa can't involve in that with 10 megabyte per second. That is another word setback. Then thirdly, talking about the logistics. Now it takes seconds to order something online. Yes, with your mobile phone, anywhere in the world. But ordering is just the first step. The half digital life we're talking about comes in when the delivery man, the dispatch rider, is about to deliver that goods to your doorsteps. Now, there's no efficient mapping addressing system in Africa. In other words, in Europe, UK to be precise, if I should order a particular package or goods and a device or anything as much as it can be to my doorsteps, I have my first line of address, which is the street name, and then I've got a postcode, a unique postcode that only my apartment or my house or my room has, that no one else has. And that particular postcode is used to pinpoint my exact doorstep, which that particular dispatch rider or delivery man will bring that goods to my doorstep. But it's not like that in Africa. Now in Africa, I can go online on my mobile phone and order a particular package, food, device, or what have you, and then the delivery man or the dispatch rider can take ages to deliver it to me. Sometimes they will need to ring my phone, to ring me on the phone to get my exact location because there's no good address mapping. Now, this causes many people not to be reliable on what online purchase of items. Why? Because they have to pay cash at hand. So many people don't trust the process of doing stuff online because at the end of the day, they might want to see that package they've ordered before they pay, thereby reducing the functionality, reducing the main goal of what the digital what existence. This and many more are some of the issues we are having in Africa. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. I would have cut you at several points, but I mean, what you're saying is very, very important for us to understand, not just from the perspective of the government, but also from the perspective of the end user, so that they can understand the challenges that go into getting products to them, getting quality internet. And it just goes to show that that's why we hear things like a would I say digital nomad or someone or a digital or a remote worker rather is has like more challenges compared to a remote worker abroad. Like so one in Africa who is a remote worker, maybe a project manager, has more challenges compared to someone who lives in the UK, in the US, or even let's say in the Netherlands. So it's very sad that this is happening. Now, my next question, because I'm sure that when you spoke about logistics, a lot of people might be thinking, oh, that's why this dispatch rider will always be complaining, calling and shouting that I didn't get your address. Now, what's going on? What's all this? Now that these issues are there, I've had a couple of conversations and we keep talking about this divide or these issues. What what are the steps that we can begin to take before we fully even dissect other conversations? What are the steps that we can clearly begin to take on the part of the operators, on the part of the business owners? Because you've raised a whole lot of conversations of how it slows down their own work. What are they doing and what can they begin to do to make it work for themselves before we even look into the aspect of the government across Africa?
It is a harsh reality that you can't run 21st century digital economy on a 19th century power grid. No, it's not. It's far from reality. The reasons African factories struggle to compete with hubs like Vietnam, Poland, China, and others isn't because of lack of talent or ambition. No, but a fundamental mismatch between digital requirements and infrastructure reality. Now, the modern manufacturing relies on high precision robotics, IoT sensors, and cloud based ERP systems to function, to produce, and to be innovative. Now, these modern technologies don't prefer power. No, they require it. It is a need for them to function properly because a 5 minute
Yes,
power outage while these technologies are in use, it's not just 5 minutes in the industrial world, it is hours
of
of
course.
setbacks because it takes hours for these machines to hums, for their engines to hums and get warm and get ready, to produce and to process data and information, thereby bringing out a great output. Now, when there is power outage, now these sensors that this technology uses, there are some set of data that are unsaved on these sensors, and that tend to what disrupt their processes. Most of those data have been lost in that process. That is what we're talking about. Now, modern technology, modern in all this modern manufacturing, they rely on just in time processes. They produce in
Mm-hmm.
time. So you don't expect, for example, in South Africa, you don't expect for partners in partners like BMW or Apple to rely on a South Africa company just because that there might be shared
Mm-hmm.
loading, power setbacks in that South African company. So you don't expect such partners like BMW or even Apple to now integrate such factory on their global digital supply chain. No, they can't. So that is what we are talking about. Now, the power outage in Africa is a major setback in the digital economy. Not to talk about the device degrading that this power surges or outages causes to these machines. Now, when there's a power surge, when there's a power outage, it affects these machines because these
Yes.
modern technological machines are very, very fragile. Very, very fragile. These are some of the issues why African factories can't actually compete. They can't compete
Of
with
course.
the Western factories.
And thank you so much for raising this. Sorry to sorry to cut you short from that.
Right.
Now, now we've spoken about Nigeria, right? And I'm thinking about other countries across the African continent.
Yeah.
Now, East Africa has what is working for them, and I'm not even sure if Southern Africa has what works for them, and West Africa too. So as much as East Africa has a central system, many other regions do not. And countries are building their own or coming up with their policies, just like Nigeria has come up with its own policies around power and also come up with policies around digital payments or across that. Now, what can the African continent begin to do? Because there are about 20 or more digital plans that have come up across different nations. What can African countries begin to do to think of like harmonizing? Because if we get to fix it in Nigeria, for example, so we have better power, we have infrastructure, and then we're working with Ghana, we're working with Kenya, Rwanda, and then we need to ensure that there is a telecom company for so that okay, so there's a telecom company, and I don't want to mention any name, but we have several of them that are Pan-African. A lot of them are Pan-African. And now it's working in Nigeria, but they moved to Kenya and there are bottlenecks, the systems, the policies, the processes. How can we as a continent begin to unite and think of steps that can help us to break these bottlenecks?
Very much. That's a very, very important factor, and I was looking forward to talk about it. Now, to reach the level of European Union's seamlessness in terms of internet connection and power, African
Yes.
regional blocks must pivot from creating plans to enforcing protocols. Now, I'll come to that. Now, for example, now instead of um, instead of each country writing its own rules, yeah, they opt in. They're supposed to opt into a continental standard. What do I mean? Now, for example, now we have about 54 countries in Africa. Do you know that if you are to set up organizations, for example, if you have a telecommunication organization now, and you want to establish in Kenya as in
Yes.
Nigeria, you have to get your legal aid, yeah, to go through the regulatories of that particular country. Do you understand me? So you have to
So
start
one after the other.
exactly. You have to start
Oh.
filing paperwork and all that. But if you have a unified regulatory system, whereby once you are registered to that regulatory system, you don't need to pass through those. random processes anymore, then it gives ease. It gives ease for investors to actually come in and just implement, invest and innovate some certain organizations that they want to do. It gives them liberty to pivot different particular businesses they wish to pivot, like we have in Europe. That
Yes.
is the thing. So, and also, if an engineer is certified in Kenya, their digital IT and credentials should be automatically what valid in Tanzania. So, but that is not the case in Africa. But that is how it is in advanced countries and in Europe. That is how it is. So that's why it's called the European Union. So Africa, they failed. Our government in Africa has failed to set up a regulatory body that governs the whole of Africa to do things in unison in a way that if I am in Nigeria and I'm going to Zimbabwe now to establish a particular
Mm-hmm.
organization, a particular telecommunication firm, a digital, a technological industry, I should not be tied. My hand shouldn't be tied to some certain factors. You understand? So rather than unique license for everybody, each individual having a unique license, blocks like ECOWAX are exploring passporting for fintechs. So they should give liberty to individuals, to organizations, to just have a particular license that can carry them all across Africa. That is what I think. Thank you.
Okay, so now let's look at the backbone, right? So it's online, we can see that about 15% of the digital infrastructure globally goes through Africa. And Africa needs roughly about $7 to $8 billion for cloud data centers and the likes. What can governments of the African continent begin to do to ensure that there is a digital backbone structure that is attractive for investment? Because, of course, we know that people are ready to invest, right? But many of these investors are probably concerned, how are we going to ensure that this works for us? How serious are the African leaders to ensure that there's ROI for them? Because an investor is investing because he's expecting to get money back. It's not like a grant. So what can African countries, and in short, the African Union as a body, begin to do in that regard?
All right. So the truth is for investors to actually come into African economy and put in their money that can raise that standard of which require 7 to 8 billion annually. There are some things that has to be set up, that has to be put in place. That has to be put in place. I don't know if you understand. So the bridge to bridge the
Yes.
annual 7 to 8 billion investment gap and lower risk premium. It makes in markets like Nigeria and Ghana, African governments must pivot from seeing digital infrastructure as a utility to be tasked. Rather, they should see it as a strategic asset to be de-risked. Now, in Africa, if a technology, a tech company is coming to set up a particular innovation, the government in Africa sees it as an avenue to generate what revenue. I don't know if you understand what I just said. They see it as
Yes.
an avenue. Oh, this is a big innovation. So if they are generating so amount of billions, that means we can tax them to so amount and we make money. Instead of seeing that tech technological innovation organization as
Yes.
a tool, a strategic asset in that particular country, they see it as a utility to be taxed. And that is our biggest problem. Unlike these European countries, unlike these advanced countries, any innovations that involves text, artificial intelligence, they see it as an asset. And sometimes the government go as far as sponsoring such projects because they know that if such organization stands and pivots transcend, it will create employment for their citizens. It will expand the
Definitely.
country's global to market to a global market. But in Africa, the government don't see it that way. They see it as an avenue to increase tax on these organizations. Now, data centers and fiber ops require 99% of uptime. which national grids in many African countries cannot currently what generate and guarantee. So no organization, no investor wants to come and put his money in an African economy, put huge amount of money in African economy, which is not even setting of a constant power supply. No, which is not even setting
That's
a stable internet connection. So
yes.
that is the basic for us. The only way African businesses can generate such billions of dollars annually in investment and draw these investors to Africa, it's only when it still boils down to power. When we have a stable power supply, then things will start working what gradually. Then lastly, there are unclear regulations. There are unclear regulations. For example, now, an investor that is not sure, is not certain about what the Nigerian government will come tomorrow, the law that Nigerian government can come and pass through tomorrow, will not want to come and invest there. Unlike, I was talking to a friend of mine, a colleague of mine, is a software builder, a developer, and he was in Rwanda for some years now. He's back fully to Nigeria. He's actually creating a particular, he's on working on a project, creating a particular software that will enhance people who have a special kind of skill. For example, like a carpenter, a tailor, fashion designer, a barber. If you have those kind of skills, you can just go on the platform and put your details there. Then, if I need such services, I can just go there and say, I need someone like this, and we can connect ourselves. He created something like that. Yeah, and he was talking to me and said, now the reason why he's feeling is having some setback is because there's some regulations that is set up in Nigeria that investors are unsure. No one wants to come and invest in such projects. Why? Because the Nigerian government can come up tomorrow and say, pass into law, a particular set of a law that limits a business to achieve some certain things. Meanwhile, in the European countries or in the advanced countries, these world countries, civilized countries we're talking about now, in the UK and Europe or thereabouts, such things don't just come up. The government don't just come and set up such laws. So by the time we have an harmonized law, whereby government cannot just wake up one day and say we want to set this into law, then investors abroad will not be scared about coming into to invest, to put their money in the country, in the economy, because they know that before a law can actually be passed and signed to affect a particular implementation, it's going to take
Yes.
a while. That's it.
Thank you for that. Now, as we wrap up, what are three concrete steps that African governments and other big players take to begin to turn these blackouts and patchy signals into stable digital backbone that every African can enjoy and benefit from?
First of all, I would say one of them is to integrate energy and digital infrastructure. Now, what do I mean by that? Now, the biggest barrier to stable internet in Africa is it's not just the lack of fiber. Now, I forgot to mention in advanced countries like the Europe, advanced continents like Europe and Asia and thereabouts. Now they use more of fibers. For example, in my home now in the United Kingdom, when I am moving house, for example, I'm entering a new house. All I need to do is to get my Wi-Fi toolbox. It's like just a box. I connect. There's already a fiber cable. I just attach it to it. Now that particular Wi-Fi tab I got it was given to me by a particular internet provider. Do you know what I mean? Let's say Home Telecom, let's say Three, let's say O2. Now I pay monthly for that. Now, but if I'm going to another house, if I'm locating, all I need to do is just to carry that particular device, and then there's already a fiber in each particular on all houses, which I just need to connect that particular fiber to, and my internet is off. And all I need to do is to call my internet provider to tell them I've changed my apartment. I have a new apartment now. I'm in a new location. I'm in a new house address, and I give them this information, and they set up everything, and it's working fine. Now, Africa, we don't do more fibers. We have We don't, in short, is to
Yes.
the barest minimum. So we now bank on data. So we have to try and integrate energy and data infrastructure. That is the point I'm trying. So the lack of those fiber and the lack of reliable electricity has deprived private players to come in and what integrate such infrastructure in our African economy. Then, instead of relying on diesel generators for towers, which are expensive, really, really expensive and prone to theft, African markets or the African economy or African government per se or investors should expand the use of decentralized solar batteries, renewable energy. Yes, that is one. Then two, the shift from hub and spoke to a cross-border mesh network. Like I said earlier on, currently, if I'm an investor or I'm a businessman, much of Africa's internet tariff is routed through Europe and North America because of lack of what regional what connectivity. That is the problem. Now, building on Kenya, and I think yes, Rwanda's efforts. Kenya and Rwanda they recently just established an effort on focusing terrestrial corridors that might ignore borders. Now,
Yes.
the lack
Yes.
of regional what connectivity. Now, there's no connectivity between Nigeria and Ghana. No connectivity between Kenya and South Africa. So telecommunication companies they come and they sell data to us, and everybody is okay. But if there's a connectivity between each countries, internet-wise, then we can what scale through. Then lastly, harmonized regulations. Back to what we said earlier on. There should be an harmonized what regulations between these African countries, the 54 African countries. There should be regulations that harmonizes all African countries together. So a particular law that states that I can use so amount of data or innovate a particular telecommunication company in Nigeria should also allow me to innovate a particular telecommunication organization in Kenya or Zimbabwe or Cote d'Ivoire. That is the problem. Yeah, that is. So these three points I think are the major solutions on how we can resolve these issues.
Thank you so much, Mr. David Utibe Abasi, for giving us so much insight on the issues that are limiting tech growth, particularly from the angle of power and internet blackouts. So, bottom line, Africa needs to unite, and the time is now. I know a lot is going on, and to try and mitigate these issues. But I think that we are far behind, just as Mr. David, you have said. And I'm sure that the government is listening to this, and even the private sector professionals, the operators, the telecom operators themselves would be looking at this. And I'm sure that they're thinking of ways to ensure that there is harmonization, because if we want the kind of advancement that we see in other continents like Europe, then we need to begin to work together. And that's all on Tech Pression Special today. Thank you again, Mr. David Utibe Abasi, for being our guest. Till we come your way again another time. My name is Ibukumba Bankole. Join us for another episode. Bye bye.